Commander Ji-won pulled her dirty cap lower over her eyes as she walked through the massive Nexus Station spaceport. The place buzzed with activity, cargo ships landing every few minutes. Alien traders shouting in dozens of languages, and the constant hum of atmospheric processes keeping the air breathable for all the different species she hadn't eaten in 12 hours. Her stomach growled as the smell of fresh coffee drifted from a small cafe wedged between her. Zephyrian crystal shop and a weapons dealer. The cafe looked modest, with mismatched chairs and tables that had seen better days, perfect for staying invisible. Ji-won approached the counter where a slug-like creature with multiple eyes served as cashier. Its skin glistened under the harsh, fluorescent lights, and thick tentacles moved the cash register with surprising speed. Behind the creature, steam rose from expensive coffee machines that probably cost more than most humans made in a year. "One black coffee," Ji-won said quietly, keeping her voice steady. The alien's main eye focused on her while the others continued scanning the cafe. 15 credits. It gurgled in heavily accented standard. Its voice carried the typical condescending tone she'd heard from aliens across the galaxy. Ji-won reached for her payment card, a basic civilian account she used for cover operations. She pressed it against the scanner and waited. The machine beeped once, twice, then flashed red with an angry buzzing sound that seemed to echo through the entire cafe. Card declined. The cashier announced loudly, its tentacles writhing with what looked like amusement. Several other eyes turned toward her, studying her worn jacket and faded pants. Typical human poverty. Should have expected this. A table of Orthan traders nearby burst into laughter. These aliens stood 7 feet tall with metallic blue skin and sharp features that always reminded Ji-won of predatory birds. They're expensive. Clothes and jewelry marked them as successful merchants, the kind who looked down on humans as nothing more than cheap labor. "Look at this one," the largest Vorthan called out in his booming voice. "Probably spent her last credits on passage. Here, thinking she could make it rich." His companions laughed harder, their metallic voices creating a harsh symphony that made other patrons turn and stare. Ji-won felt heat rising in her cheeks round the cafe. Conversations had stopped. A family of insectoid klaxons clicked there, mandibles in what she recognized as their version of laughter. Even a group of normally peaceful Etherians, beings of pure energy in containment suits, seemed to pulse brighter with amusement. She'd faced down enemy fleets, commanded thousands of soldiers, and negotiated with hostile alien governments. But, standing here in civilian clothes, being mocked for something as simple as buying coffee, she felt smaller than she had in years. Maybe try the water dispenser. One of the Vorthans suggested loudly, "It's free, even for humans." This brought another wave of laughter from around the cafe. Ji-won's hand moved instinctively toward where her sidearm would normally be, but she wore no weapon today. She was supposed to be invisible, just another human struggling to survive. In alien space, breaking cover would compromise months of intelligence gathering. "I'll cover it," a quiet voice said behind her. She turned to see a young human man stepping forward. He looked to be in his mid-20s, with kind eyes and calloused hands that spoke of hard work. His maintenance uniform was clean but patched in several places, and his boots were worn thin from long hours on metal deck plates. A name tag on his chest read Hyunwoo in both standard and Korean characters. "You don't have to," Ji-won began. But he was already moving past her to the counter. "To coffees," Hyunwoo said calmly, placing his credit chip on the scanner. "And make them large." The machine beeped green, accepting the payment without hesitation. The Vorthan traders had gone quiet, clearly not expecting this turn of events. The slug-like cashier's tentacles moved more slowly now, preparing the drinks with what seemed like reluctance. "It's just coffee," Hyunwoo said to Ji-won with a gentle smile. We humans should look out for each other, especially here. He gestured round the cafe, where alien eyes still watched them with a mixture of curiosity and disdain as they waited for their drinks. Hyunwoo didn't seem bothered by the stares or whispers. He stood with quiet confidence, the kind that came from knowing who you were regardless of what others thought. When the cashier slid the steaming cups across the counter with obvious annoyance, Hyunwoo thanked the creature politely. "Thank you," Ji-won said. Accepting her coffee, the warmth felt good in her hands, but the kindness behind the gesture warmed her even more. "What's your name?" Hyunwoo asked as they moved away from the counter. "Ji-won," she replied, using her real first name but keeping her rank and family name hidden. They found a small table near the viewing port where ships could be seen coming and going against the backdrop of distant stars. As Ji-won sipped her coffee, she studied this stranger who had shown her kindness without expecting anything in return. In a galaxy where humans were often treated as second-class citizens, his simple act of generosity felt revolutionary. Hyunwoo's boots echoed through the narrow maintenance corridors of Nexus Station as he made his way home. The shift had been brutal, 14 hours crawling through ventilation shafts, fixing broken atmospheric processes while Vorthan supervisors shouted orders at him like he was some kind of machine. His back ached, his hands were cut from sharp metal edges, and his uniform reeked of coolant fluid, but none of that mattered now. He was going home to Minji. The residential section for human workers sat in the lowest levels of the station, where the artificial gravity felt heavier and the air recyclers worked harder to filter out industrial fumes. Hyunwoo's quarters were barely large enough for 2 people. Just a single room with a fold-out bed, a tiny kitchen unit, and the medical equipment that kept his sister alive. He pressed his palm against the door scanner, and it slid open with a soft hiss. The room was dimly lit, filled with the steady beeping of monitors and the gentle whoosh of the life support system. Medical tubes snaked across the floor like technological vines, or leading to the bed where Minji lay. His younger sister was only 19. But the rare genetic disease had aged her beyond her years. Her once bright eyes were now sunken, and her skin had taken on a pale, almost translucent quality. The condition attacked her cellular structure at the molecular level, and without constant medical intervention, her organs would simply shut down one by one. "Hyunwoo," Minji's voice was barely above a whisper, but she managed to smile when she saw him. "You're late today. Sorry." "Little sister, the Vorthans had us working on the new docking bay." He sat down beside her bed, careful not to disturb any of the medical cables. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm floating," she said with a weak laugh. "The pain medication makes everything feel fuzzy. But I finished another chapter of my novel today." Hyunwoo's heart swelled with pride. Even confined to bed, Minji continued writing stories about brave humans exploring the galaxy, finding new worlds, and proving that humanity belonged among the stars. Her imagination had always been her greatest strength. "How was work?" she asked, trying to sit up a little. The effort made her breathing machine work harder. "Good. Helped someone today," Hyunwoo replied, thinking about the woman in the cafe. He didn't mention the Vorthan foreman who had called him worthless human scum for taking too long to repair a perfectly functioning sensor array. He didn't talk about the overtime hours he'd worked without pay, or how the alien medical staff had refused to even look at Minji's latest test results because they claimed human medicine was primitive. That's nice," Minji said softly. "I always tell you, kindness comes back to us somehow." Hyunwoo squeezed her hand gently. If only that were true. He'd been kind his whole life, worked harder than anyone else, never complained or caused trouble. But kindness didn't pay for the experimental treatments Minji needed. Kindness didn't convince the Galactic Medical Council to approve human research into genetic diseases. Kindness certainly didn't make alien doctors see humans as worth saving. The medical monitor beside her bed flashed yellow, indicating her blood oxygen levels were dropping again. Hyunwoo adjusted the settings on her breathing apparatus, a skill he'd learned through necessity rather than training. The human medical staff on Nexus Station was limited, and most alien doctors refused to treat humans except in emergencies. Get some rest, he whispered, pulling the thin blanket up to her chin. I'll be right here. As Minji drifted off to sleep, Hyunwoo stared out the tiny porthole that showed a slice of space beyond the station. Somewhere out there, humanity was fighting to prove itself worthy of a place in the galactic community. But down here, in the forgotten corners of alien space, humans like him and Minji were just trying to survive another day. Meanwhile, thousands of kilometers away, the sleek stealth ship Seoul's Pride hung invisible in the shadow of a massive asteroid from her. Outside, it looked like nothing more than space debris. Inside, however, it housed the most advanced technology humanity had ever created. Admiral Ji-won Park stood in the ship's command center, still wearing the same worn civilian clothes from the cafe. But here, surrounded by holographic displays, showing fleet positions and tactical data, she looked entirely different. Her posture was straight, her eyes sharp with intelligence and authority. This was her true self, not the struggling human she'd pretended to be on the station. The command center hummed with quiet efficiency. Officers in crisp uniforms monitored dozens of screens showing Vorthan ship movements, communication intercepts, and detailed scans of military installations. Banks of quantum computers processed intelligence data at speeds that would make alien technology look primitive. Admiral, welcome back. Captain Seekman approached with a data pad in his hands. He was a tall, serious man in his 30s who had served as her aide for 3 years. The reconnaissance mission was successful. I assume. More than successful, Captain, Ji-won replied, moving to the central holographic display. With a gesture, she brought up the tactical data she'd gathered during her time on Nexus Station. The Vorthans are definitely planning something big. 3 new battle cruisers docked yesterday, and I counted at least 50 fighter craft being prepped for deployment. Siegmund nodded, making notes on his pad. Should we alert the fleet? Yes, but there's something else. Ji-won's fingers danced over the control panel, bringing up personnel files from the station. I want you to research someone for me. Full background check, medical records, employment history. Everything. She pulled up Hyunwoo's identification photo from the station's database. The young man's kind eyes looked back at them from the holographic display, his maintenance uniform a stark contrast to the military precision surrounding them. A maintenance worker. Admiral. Seekman looked puzzled. Is he a security risk? Quite the opposite, Ji-won said quietly, remembering the warmth in Hyunwoo's voice when he'd said humans should look out for each other. I think he might be exactly what humanity needs. Captain Seekman returned to the command center 6 hours later, his face grim as he carried a thick data pad filled with information. Admiral Ji-won stood before the main tactical display, studying Vorthan fleet movements. But she turned when she heard his footsteps. What did you find? She asked, though something in his expression told her she wasn't going to like the answer. Lee Hyunwoo, age 26, Seekman began, reading from his pad. Born on Octar's colony to parents who were agricultural engineers, when he was 12. Vorthan raiders attacked the colony during what they called a resource acquisition. Operation Ji-won's jaw tightened. She remembered Octar's. It had been one of humanity's most successful farming worlds, producing food for dozens of systems. The official reports said it was destroyed by unknown pirates, but intelligence had always suspected Vorthan involvement. His parents were killed defending the colony's seed vault. Sigmund continued. Hyunwoo and his younger sister Minji were among only 300 survivors out of 50,000 colonists. They were relocated to a refugee station and eventually ended up here on Nexus. The numbers hit G1 like a physical blow. 50,000 people. An entire world of families, dreams, and futures wiped out for resources. And the galaxy had barely noticed. That's not the worst part, Sigmund said quietly. For the past 8 years, he's been working 3 jobs to pay for his sister's medical care. She has genetic cascade syndrome, a rare condition that affects less than 1 in a million humans. The treatment exists, but it costs more than most people make in a lifetime. G1 knew about genetic cascade syndrome. It was a brutal disease that slowly shut down the body's cellular repair mechanisms. Without treatment, victims rarely lived past 25. With proper care, they could live normal lives. He's applied to 17 different alien medical facilities. Sigmund continued. Every single one rejected his sister's application. The official reason is always insufficient resources. But the real reason is simpler. They don't treat humans. 3 jobs, Ji-won asked, though she dreaded the answer. Maintenance work here on the station during the day, cleaning cargo holds at night, and repair work on civilian ships during his off hours. He averages about 4 hours of sleep per night and hasn't taken a day off in 2 years. Ji-won turned back to the tactical display, but she wasn't seeing Vorthan ship positions anymore. She was seeing a young man who had lost everything, who worked himself to exhaustion every day, and who still had enough kindness in his heart to buy coffee for a stranger. Admiral, there's more, Sigmund said. I pulled security footage from the station. You need to see this. The main screen switched to surveillance video from 3 days earlier. It showed a corridor in the maintenance section where a group of human workers were doing repairs. Suddenly, 5 Vorthan overseers surrounded them, their voices loud and aggressive even without audio. They're complaining about the work being too slow. Sigmund translated the alien speech, calling the humans lazy and worthless. On screen, the Vorthans began pushing the human workers, clearly trying to provoke a reaction. Most of the humans backed away, but then Hyunwoo stepped forward. He was smaller than any of the Vorthans, exhausted from his long shift. But he placed himself between the aliens and his fellow workers. What's he saying? Ji-won asked. Sigmund enhanced the audio. Hyunwoo's voice came through clearly. We're working as fast as we can. The repairs are complex, and we want to do them right. If you're not satisfied with our work, you can file a complaint with station management. The lead Vorthan laughed and shoved Hyunwoo hard enough to knock him backward. But the young man got back up, never raising his voice or his fists, and continued to shield the other workers. Eventually, the Vorthans got bored and left. He does this regularly, Sigmund said. Stands up to alien harassment even when he's outnumbered. The other human workers look up to him like he's their unofficial leader. Ji-won felt a surge of pride mixed with anger. This was what humanity could be at its best. Not the strongest or the smartest species in the galaxy, but the most determined to do what was right. And the galaxy rewarded that courage by letting people like Hyunwoo struggle alone. Admiral, Sigmund said, his voice suddenly urgent. I'm picking up massive energy signatures. Multiple ships decloaking near the station. The tactical display exploded with red warning markers as dozens of Vorthan warships materialized from stealth mode. They had completely surrounded Nexus Station, their weapons already charging. How many? Ji-won demanded. Moving to the command console, 47 ships. including 12 heavy cruisers and 3 battleships. Their in attack formation alarms began blaring throughout the Soul's Pride as the crew rushed to battle stations. On the main screen, G1 could see the first green plasma blasts striking the station's outer hull. The Vorthans weren't bothering with warnings or negotiations. They were going straight for maximum destruction, Admiral. The civilian cafe sector just took a direct hit, an officer reported. Ji-won's blood ran cold. That was where she'd met Hyun-woo, where he'd shown her that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in weapons or technology, but in simple kindness. Now it was being destroyed by the same species that had already taken everything else from him. Through the station's external cameras, she could see chaos erupting in the corridors. Civilians of all species were running for emergency shelters, but many were trapped as bulkheads sealed to contain atmosphere breaches. And there, in the middle of the destruction, she spotted a familiar figure. Hyun-woo was carrying an injured Klaxon civilian toward safety, the same species that had laughed at humans in the cafe. Behind him, he dragged a wounded Etherian whose containment suit had been damaged. He wasn't looking for humans to save. He was helping everyone he could find, even the aliens who had mocked his people just hours before. Battle stations, Ji-won commanded, her voice carrying across the ship's communication system. All hands to combat positions. This is Admiral Park to all human Defense Fleet vessels in the sector. We have a code red. Situation at Nexus Station. Civilian lives are in immediate danger. The Soul's Pride's engines roared to life as the ship shed its stealth coating and revealed its true nature. Round them, space shimmered as more human vessels decloaked destroyers, cruisers, and fighters that had been hiding in the asteroid field, waiting for this moment. Sir, the weapons officer called out. Well, batteries are charged and ready to fire. Ji-won watched the tactical display as Vorthan ships continued their assault on the station. She thought about Hyun-woo, still down there saving lives while his world burned round him. She thought about his sister Minji, probably terrified in their tiny quarters as the station shook from explosions. Target the Vorthan flagship. She ordered, "Let's show them what happens when you threaten our people." The Soul's Pride erupted from the asteroid field like a beast awakening from slumber. Its sleek black hull gleamed as adaptive camouflage peeled away, revealing the proud insignia of the human defense fleet painted in gold across its bow. The ship was a masterpiece of human engineering, 2 kilometers of cutting-edge technology that had taken the galaxy's best minds 15 years to design. All weapon systems online. The tactical officer shouted as the ship's massive railguns swiveled toward their targets. Plasma torpedoes loaded and ready, Admiral Ji-won strapped herself into the command chair as the ship accelerated toward the Vorthan fleet. Round them, space lit up with the bright flashes of other human vessels dropping their stealth fields, destroyers, cruisers. And sleek fighter craft materialized from empty space like ghosts becoming solid. Admiral, the Vorthans are repositioning. Captain Sigmin reported. They're trying to use the station as a shield. Not if I can help it. Ji-won replied grimly. She switched to the fleet-wide communication channel. All vessels, this is Admiral Park. Priority 1. Protect civilian lives. Priority 2. Show these bastards what happens when they mess with humanity. The Soul's Pride opened fire with its main batteries. Brilliant blue energy beams lanced across space, striking the nearest Vorthan cruiser's shields. The alien ship's protective barriers flared and sparked, then collapsed entirely under the sustained assault. The cruiser tried to turn away, but human torpedoes slammed into its hull, sending chunks of metal spinning into the void. "First blood to us," the weapons officer called out with satisfaction. But the Vorthans weren't going down without a fight. Their ships moved with predatory grace, firing volleys of green plasma that lit up space like deadly fireworks. One blast caught a human destroyer on its port side, tearing through armor plating and venting atmosphere into space. The Deguirs hit, Siegmen reported. They're losing power to main engines. Dispatch fighters to cover them. G1 ordered. Then she made a decision that surprised everyone on the bridge. Captain, you have the con. I'm taking personal command of Phoenix. Squadron, Admiral, you can't be serious. Siegmen protested. Your place is on the bridge, not in a fighter cockpit. G1 was already moving toward the hangar bay. My place is wherever I can do the most good, and right now, that's out there, minutes later. Admiral G1 Park climbed into the cockpit of her personal fighter, the sleek, deadly machine called the Phoenix. The craft was smaller than most Vorthan fighters, but packed with experimental weapons and engines that could outmaneuver anything high. In known space, Phoenix Squadron, form up. Oni, she commanded as her fighter shot out of the Soul's Pride's hangar bay. Round her, 11 other fighters fell into perfect formation, their pilots among the best humanity had ever produced. The space battle raged round them as they dove toward Nexus Station. Vorthan fighters swarmed like angry insects, their weapons, painting deadly green streaks across the star field. But human pilots had been training for this moment their entire careers, and they moved through the chaos with lethal precision. Phoenix 7, you've got 3 bogies on your tail. G1 called out, spinning her fighter in an impossible corkscrew maneuver that brought her guns to bear on the pursuing Vorthans. Her laser cannon spoke twice, and 2 alien fighters exploded. In brilliant fireballs as the dogfight continued round her, G1 opened a communication channel to the station. She needed to make sure the civilians were getting to safety, especially one particular maintenance worker who had shown her what humanity truly meant. Nexus Station. This is Admiral Park of the Human Defense Fleet. She transmitted on all frequencies. All civilians proceed to emergency shelters immediately. Static crackled for a moment. Then a familiar voice came through the comm system. Admiral Park. Is that really you, Hyunwoo? This is Admiral Park, she replied, dodging a plasma blast. That would have vaporized her fighter. Get to Emergency Base 7. That's the safest location on the station. There was a pause. Then Hyunwoo's voice returned, filled with amazement. Admiral Park, wait. You're the woman from the cafe. The one whose card was declined. Despite the battle raging round her, D1 couldn't help but smile. The coffee was excellent. Now move and take your sister with you, my sister. How do you know about? Hyunwoo's voice was interrupted by an explosion that shook the communication channel. Questions later. Survival now. G1 balked. Emergency Base 7. That's an order. As Phoenix Squadron continued their deadly dance with Vorthan fighters, G1 watched the tactical display on her heads-up screen. Human ships were methodically surrounding the enemy fleet, cutting off escape routes and forcing the Vorthans into a never-tightening circle. The alien commander's ship, a massive battleship bristling with weapons, tried to break through the human lines. Its heavy guns fired continuously, but human shields held firm while return fire pounded its hull. Suddenly, the Vorthan commander's arrogant voice filled the communication channels, broadcast on all frequencies so every ship in the battle could hear. Pathetic humans. You think your primitive technology can match the might of the Vorthan Empire? Surrender now. Human filth, and we might let some of you live as slaves. The comm channel fell silent for a moment. Then Admiral G1 Park's cold, controlled voice cut through space like a blade. This is Admiral G1 Park of the Human Defense Fleet, she replied, her fighter performing another impossible maneuver that brought her within visual range of the alien. Battleship, you made 3 mistakes today. First, you attacked civilians under my protection. Second, you threatened people I care about. Third, You called us primitive. A fighter's targeting system locked onto the battleship's bridge section. That was your last mistake. The coordinated assault that followed was a thing of beauty. Dozens of human ships opened fire simultaneously. Their weapons synchronized to overwhelm the Vorthan flagship's defenses, the alien ship's shields. Collapsed, its armor cracked, and its weapons went silent one by one. Within minutes, the once mighty Vorthan fleet was either destroyed or fleeing toward the edge of the system. Their commander's ship limped away on emergency power, trailing atmosphere and debris dot as the last Vorthan vessel disappeared into hyperspace. Admiral Park's voice rang out across the galaxy on all communication frequencies. The battle had been broadcast by news networks throughout known space, and billions of beings had watched humanity's first major military victory. Let this be a message to anyone who thinks humans are weak. She announced, "We protect our own. We stand together, and we never, ever give up." In the quiet that followed, as human ships began rescue operations and damage assessment, one question echoed through alien governments across the galaxy. If humans could do this when defending a simple space station, what would they be capable of when truly threatened? The answer, they would soon learn, was more than they could possibly imagine. 1 month after the Battle of Nexus Station, Hyunwoo stood in the most advanced medical facility humanity had ever built. The Park Industries Medical Center orbited Earth like a gleaming silver moon, its rotating sections generating artificial gravity while thousands of the galaxy's best doctors and researchers worked out. And the clock to push the boundaries of medical science through the massive viewing windows of the pediatric ward. Earth hung in space like a blue marble, beautiful and peaceful. But Hyunwoo's attention was focused on something even more amazing happening right in front of him. His sister Minji was walking. Not just walking. She was actually running round the recreation area, laughing as she played zero-gravity tag with a group of children from dozens of different species. There was a young Klaxon whose chitinous shell gleamed purple in the artificial sunlight, a pair of Etherian twins whose energy forms sparkled like living stars, and even a small Vorthan child whose metallic blue skin had lost the harsh edge that marked adult members of his species. "Hyunwoo, watch this," Minji called out, pushing off from the floor and spinning through the air in a perfect somersault before landing gracefully on the padded walls. The genetic cascade syndrome that had kept her bedridden for years was completely gone, eliminated by a revolutionary treatment that Park Industries had developed in record time. "She's incredible," Dr. Sarah Kim said, approaching with Minji's latest medical charts. Her cellular regeneration rates are now above normal human levels. The treatment didn't just cure her condition, it actually strengthened her entire genetic structure. Hyunwoo could barely believe it. 3 months ago, he'd been working himself to death just to keep Minji alive for another day. Now she was healthier than she'd ever been, and her future stretched out bright and limitless. "The best part," Dr. Kim continued, "is that we've been able to replicate the treatment for other patients. We've already cured 47 cases of genetic cascade syndrome across 5 different species. Your sister's case was the breakthrough we needed." Footsteps echoed in the corridor behind them, and Hyunwoo turned to see Admiral Ji-won Park approaching. She looked different than she had during the battle, less like a military commander and more like the kind CEO she'd revealed herself to be. Her business suit was elegant but practical, and her smile was warm and genuine. "How's our miracle patient doing?" Ji-won asked, watching Minji demonstrate an impressive aerial maneuver to her new friends. "I still can't believe." "Your Admiral, Park," Hyunwoo said, shaking his head in amazement. "The woman who bought me coffee turned out to be the most powerful human in the galaxy. I'm also CEO of the company that just hired you as Director of Humanitarian Operations," Ji-won replied with a grin. That coffee meant more to me than you know. It reminded me why we fight, not for territory or resources, but for moments like this. She handed him a data pad containing his new employment contract. The salary alone was more than he'd made in the past 5 years combined. But the real treasure was the job description. He would be responsible for identifying humans in need across the galaxy and making sure they got help. No more would people like him and Minji have to struggle alone. There's something else, Jiwon said, leading him to the window overlooking Earth. The Galactic Council has invited humanity to join as a full member species. We'll have voting rights, trade privileges, and most importantly, our own voice in galactic affairs. Hyunwoo stared at the blue planet below, thinking about how much had changed. A month ago, humans were treated as second-class citizens throughout the galaxy. Now, they were being offered a seat at the table with the most powerful species in known space. It's because of what happened at the station. Jiwon continued. The battle was broadcast across every system. Billions of beings watched humans risk their lives to protect civilians of all species. They saw our technology, our tactics, and our courage. But most importantly, they saw our values. Back on Nexus Station, the cafe where their story had begun was busier than ever. Hyunwoo's friend Doyeon had taken over as manager, and the little establishment had become a pilgrimage site for humans throughout the sector. Above the entrance, a simple plaque told the story in multiple languages, where humanity's greatest victory began with a C. Ample act of kindness, Doyeon served customers with the same warmth that Hyunwoo had shown that day, and the cafe had become a symbol of human values. Alien visitors often came just to experience what they called human hospitality, and many left with a new understanding of what humanity represented. The story had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. News networks, entertainment programs, and even academic institutions told the tale of how maintenance workers' compassion had revealed an admiral's identity, leading to humanity's first major military victory against alien oppression. Children of every species learned about the human who had bought coffee for a stranger and unknowingly changed the course of galactic history. The Fourthen Empire had retreated from human space entirely, their government issuing formal apologies and reparations for the Arcturus colony massacre. Other species that had once looked down on humans now sought them out as allies and trading partners. The Klaxons established cultural exchange programs. The Etherians shared advanced energy technologies, and even the proud Zephyrians requested human advisors for their diplomatic cause. But perhaps the most important change was happening in the hearts and minds of humans themselves. Across the galaxy, human communities were standing taller, speaking with stronger voices and refusing to accept discrimination. The victory at Nexus Station had proven that humanity belonged among the stars, and no one could deny it anymore. Admiral Jiwon Park made it a point to visit the rebuilt cafe whenever her duties brought her to Nexus Station. She would sit at the same table by the viewing port, sipping coffee and watching ships come and go. Each time, she remembered that moment when a young maintenance worker had stepped forward to help a stranger. Not because he had to, but because it was the right thing to do. The galaxy had learned something that day, something that would reshape interstellar relations for generations to come. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't their advanced weapons, their tactical brilliance, or their stubborn determination, though all of those had played their part. Their true power lay in their willingness to help others, even when they had nothing to gain from it. As Minji continued to play with her friends, her laughter echoing through the medical center, Hyunwoo realized that his sister had been right all along. Kindness did come back to them, sometimes in ways they could never have imagined. In the end, the galaxy learned what humans had always known. Kindness is the most powerful force in the universe. The end.